Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched Hitman. Let's talk about it. So Hitman is directed by Richard Linklater, who also famously directed the Before trilogy, as well as the iconic, the legendary, awesome-tacular School of Rock, which of course starred Jack Black and was an incredible family movie from the early 2000s. Well, this time around we have a brand new 2020s star at the center of the story with Glen Powell, who of course found huge mega fame and success from his appearance in Top Gun Maverick. And not only does Glen Powell star in this film, but he also co-wrote the script, which I think is a pretty big deal. Like, congrats to him. We'll be talking about my thoughts on the script and the movie as a whole in this video, so if that sounds fun to you, then keep watching. But before we get into all that good stuff, as per usual, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel if you want to and turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. This is going to be a fun, exciting month. We finally have some juicy releases to sink our teeth into, so I'm looking forward to posting my thoughts on all of that good stuff. But before we dive into the rest of June, let's get into Hitman. So Hitman is centered on Glen Powell's Gary Johnson, who is a professor at the University of New Orleans. He teaches psychology and philosophy, and he's fascinated in all things humankind, humanity, personalities, that sort of thing. On the surface, Gary seems to be a pretty mundane bloke. Like, he's nothing special, he's nothing spectacular, he's just bog standard. Like, he's a bit of a nerd. His class is kind of bored by him at the beginning of the film. Like, they are clearly not particularly interested in or engaged in his classes. He just seems to be like a blank sheet of paper. There's nothing exciting, nothing spicy about this character, despite the fact that he is portrayed by a very charismatic Glen Powell, but more on that later. So at the beginning of the film, the character has plenty of room for improvement, but he seems pretty content with his life, although he has already gone through a divorce and he's still friends with his ex-wife, but it's like a weird arrangement. But thankfully, he's got himself a nice little hobby on the side, and that involves him doing some tech work, doing some, messing around with bits and bobs on behalf of the New Orleans police, until one day where he is called in to do a little bit more than just tinker around in a van, because they need someone who could be the fake hitman to trap someone. It's basically entrapment. To trap someone who intends to put a hit on an enemy. Now, the regular hitman that they usually turn to, who's called Jasper, he's really good at his job, but he also has a side hustle of beating up teenagers and getting caught on camera. And so he's been cancelled / put on paid leave, which is typical police behavior, whatever. And so they need Gary to step in there and act as this pretend hitman to get this potential criminal. And so that's what he does. He's a natural at it. He's able to act like he's an actual hitman to get this bad guy on audio saying that he wants to put a hit on someone, and therefore plenty of evidence is given to the police to put this guy behind bars. And after seeing what he can do, the police department decides to, replace Jasper with Gary. And so we see this really fun, cool montage of Gary embodying all of these different personalities and all of these different sort of takes on a hitman, a stereotypical hitman, the likes of which we would see in many movies and TV shows, so that he could entrap a bunch of people, all different kinds of people who seek to put a hit out on their worst enemies, and sometimes even lovers. Now, it's all going well for Gary. It's pretty much the best of both worlds for him, because not only is he making money on the side, it's hard out here in this cost of living crisis, okay, but he's also able to embody these different kinds of personalities and become a different kind of person, live a different kind of life through these different personas that he creates for his job with the police department. And it informs the lectures that he gives at the university that are all about psychology and all about philosophy, the philosophy of the person. What makes you you? How do you understand yourself? All the while he is living out his theories and hypotheses through this side hustle that is slowly but surely taking over his whole life. And so it's all well and good until one day the honeypot trap is set for this gorgeous, stunning woman called Madison. Madison is seeking to take a hit out on her husband, who is abusive and who sucks. And so she desperately needs the help of one of Gary's hitman aliases called Ron. Now, Ron is smooth, he is slick, he is very different to some of the other personas that we see Gary embody. We see some Tilda Swintoning, which is actually one of my favorites. That was one of my favorites from the movie. As soon as he had that ginger wig on, I said, oh, something serious is about to happen. But we saw the Tilda Swinton type character. We saw the Patrick Bateman type character, right from American Psycho. He looked eerily close to Christian Bale during that scene, especially when he steps out in the costume. I was like, whoa, I had to do a double take. But we even got that Russian mobster kind of character. Like, you could tell that Glen Powell was having the time of his life embodying these personas. But when it comes to the character of Ron, he's quite different. He's very smooth, cool, calm, collected, very sexy, very confident, and very different to Gary himself, to his actual personality. But it's interesting because even though Gary has embodied these other personas that are very different to what he's like in real life, with the character of Ron, it's kind of like the type of character that's just within reach of him. Like, it's not out of the realm of possibility, so long as Gary just tweaked a few things about his personality and about his life, he could be Ron. And I think that's what makes Ron so seductive and so attractive to him as a personality that he could take on permanently. We keep that in mind for now. But in order to trap these suspects, Gary has been, customizing his personas to suit the suspect, to make it seem like he really is a hitman and that he can be trustworthy to them specifically. And so that's where the character of Ron comes in. Madison immediately takes a liking to him and she's kind of sucked into his aura, and that's all well and good, except now Gary doesn't want her to be trapped. No, Gary doesn't want her to end up in prison because she's hot. Let's be real, it's because she's hot, okay, she's stunning, she's gorgeous, and he's like, nah, she's too pretty to be in prison. And not to mention, of course, she wants to kill her husband, but only because he's abusive. She's a damsel in distress and she needs his help. And so despite the fact that Madison is in a very similar position to all the other suspects that Gary has nabbed for the police, instead of luring her into his usual trap, he actually tells her to run away. Run away and never return. He tells her to take the money that she was going to pay him with and start a new life with it instead. Get a whole new apartment, divorce her husband, just get away from him instead of trying to kill him, because that would land her in prison. And so the damsel is rescued. The damsel is saved from a lifetime prison sentence, all because she's pretty, all because she cries pretty tears. Nah, just kidding. But soon afterwards they end up reuniting, and Gary finds himself having to continue the facade of being Ron because she believes him to be an actual hitman still. And so they start this very sexy, very sensual, sort of lust-filled relationship with each other, and all seems to be well and good until Madison's horrible, filthy, disgusting husband comes back into the scene and he ruins everything, leading to Ron's secret identity as Gary Johnson being revealed, and all hell breaks loose. So therein is the story of Hitman. Now, going into this movie, I have to say I was really, really excited, because I remember just last year when this movie premiered at, I think it was Sundance or South by Southwest. I can't remember which festival it was, but I do remember that the critics that got to see this movie early were really, really impressed by it. They had a whole ton of praise for it. They said it was incredible, it was amazing. And so I was really excited to see this film, and I even mentioned as much during my review of The Killer, which starred Michael Fassbender, and many people thought was an inferior sort of Hitman movie in comparison to Hitman. And so going into this, my expectations were like sky high. I'll be honest, my expectations were like here. I was like, I'm about to have the time of my life. And in the end, I had a good time. Do I think that this movie is the second coming of Christ, the way that many of the critics coming out of whatever film festival from 2023 said it was? No. I'm afraid not. But did I have a good time nonetheless? I did. I really did. I did enjoy this movie, even though there were elements of the story that kind of disappointed me. But to be fair, this is not entirely the film's fault. This, unfortunately, is one of those films where I had an idea of what was going to happen and direction it was going in, and then it just veered left. Like, it just went in a completely different direction, and that in itself isn't an issue. But then I found myself trying to predict what would happen next, and the storylines that I was coming up with were just like so extravagant. They were just so maybe convoluted and detailed and interesting, to me at least, to me. But in the end, the actual movie ended up being a lot simpler and just a little bit underwhelming. Let me explain, okay? Let me explain what I was actually expecting. So expectation number one, I thought this was going to be about an actual hitman. I thought Glen Powell was going to be playing a hitman that takes on these different personas in order to engage with different clients, and then he'll swiftly move on to another city or something and then change personas again, have whole identities to him. Like, that's what I thought we were doing with the script. That's where I thought the script was going to be scripting, but that wasn't the case. It turned out that he was a fake hitman, which fine, that was a twist and turn that I could get down with. But then expectation number two. Expectation number two, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. For instance, when Madison was introduced and she was, suffering abuse from her husband and she was terrified of him, she mentions that he's a dangerous man. So I was like, oh, I see what's going to happen. Madison's husband's going to be a dangerous criminal mastermind, a gangster, if you will, a gangster, and he's going to cross paths against someone who is genuinely dangerous whilst he's pretending to be Ron, pretending to be this hitman, but in reality he's nowhere near as dangerous as Madison's husband. And so that's where the chaos, that's where the issue would lie. So that was expectation number two, and then in the end we didn't really get that. Madison's husband was definitely a dickhead, he definitely sucked, but he wasn't like a criminal mastermind or anything like that. And then he ends up dying unceremoniously by Madison's hand, and we don't even get to see that. Like, we don't actually get to see her kill him, which is a little bit disappointing. So again, that was expectation number two that was just kind of thrown into the wind. But okay, expectation number three, when it's revealed that Madison was the one who killed her husband, I thought we would get a turn with her character. I was like, oh, okay, maybe she was the evil mastermind all along. Maybe she did actually kill him for the $1 million insurance money. Like, so I thought something was going to happen with Madison's character, and it would be like a reversal, because Gary was pretending to be Ron, pretending to be this person that he really wasn't. We would find out that Madison was doing the same thing, and so they were kind of mirroring each other, right? But it was the reverse, because Madison was pretending to be innocent and a soft little baby girl, but in reality she was a malicious murderer who actually wanted to pin the murder on her husband, on Gary/Ron. So like that's what I thought. Do you see what I mean? Like my mind was racing ahead at all of these different storylines, and in the end I was like, oh, like. Then expectation number 4 came when Jasper entered the room. Okay, when Jasper entered the room and threatens to reveal the true nature of Gary and Madison's relationship, and the fact that Gary was pretending to be a Ron with Madison and they were involved together and that's super inappropriate, etc. and so forth. I thought that would lead to them actually trying to get the insurance money and actually bribing Jasper to shut the hell up, okay, until eventually he would die by some unfortunate circumstances that would be, you know, both an accident but also convenient. Then they would run away together with the $1 million insurance money or something. I don't know. At that point, I was kind of befuddled by where this movie was going. So I was like, maybe that's what could happen. Like, I was kind of grasping at straws here. Unfortunately, the ending of this film, in my opinion, ended up being worse than my half-assed ending because essentially you have Madison poisoning Jasper, poisoning the beer that he drinks with drugs. Like, literally all she says is, I put drugs in his beer. What kind of drugs, sis? How many drugs? What kind of drugs do you have access to? What the hell is going on? He puts drugs in his beer and he's on the verge of death. And then you have Gary stepping in and being like, you know what, let's just finish this off. And he gets a plastic bag, which is wild. He gets a plastic bag and just suffocates the guy. Just ties a neat little knot and then starts making out with Madison over this man's corpse, over this man. And they start saying wedding vows. They literally start saying wedding vows, acting like they're at an altar in front of all their friends and family, declaring their love for one another. What is happening? And then in the epilogue, we fast forward in the near future where we see them with their 2 children, even though they look like they haven't aged a single day. And they're just living their happily ever after together. And it's just like a regular old life. Like they haven't even become spies or anything. They haven't. That ending to me was mind-boggling. It was disappointing. It just felt kind of half-assed and a little bit rushed, and it didn't feel like it followed the thread of the story that had been set up in the first 2/3 of the movie. So yeah, that kind of threw me off. And I'll admit, like I said, I did have high expectations going in, and I did start to ruminate and come up with my own storylines that I got a bit too excited about. But even putting those 2 things to the side, that ending was just like preposterous. Like, that ending was wild. Now, even though I had some issues with the story itself, I will say one thing that absolutely worked about this was Glen Powell. Glen Powell as Gary was just absolutely phenomenal. This guy is so talented. He's so charismatic, so likable, okay? And this is coming from someone who's sick and tired of seeing the same old stories about straight white men that we've been seeing a lot of in Hollywood recently. Don't think I haven't noticed Hollywood. But yeah, this is even coming from me. I'm like, you know what? Fair enough. Like, more Glen Powell can only be a good thing because he is a genuinely talented actor, and you could tell that he really wants to, you know, thrive and succeed, and he really wants it, basically, judging off of the press that he's been doing. He's definitely been putting the legwork to promote this movie and himself as a rising star of the 2020s, and so good for him because he definitely has the talent to back it up. Like I said, I loved seeing Gary embody the different personas, you know, the different characters that he created in order to trap different people when they were trying to hire him as a hitman. And it was also quite clever to tie that into his work as a professor teaching psychology and philosophy. And, you know, oftentimes he would go through philosophical theories and hypotheses that were related to what he was doing as a side hustle with the police. And so as the film goes on, you see how the personas that he created to embody these different types of hitmen become a part of him, especially the character of Ron. He starts to dress differently. You see how he becomes just a little bit more stylish. He has a little bit more swagger to him. Do you know what I mean? His hair is a lot more styled. His clothes are a little bit tighter. Like, he's looking good. Like, he's looking good. And it's all because he's embodying that persona of Ron. And he talks about this with his class while simultaneously living that as a reality. What's fascinating is that in the scene where he has that argument with Madison and she reveals that she killed her husband, and he's all shocked and he reveals that he's not actually Ron, he's just Gary pretending to be a hitman for the police. In that moment, Glen Powell does such a great job of like deconstructing the character. You see the persona just break down right in front of your eyes, and even hair and makeup do a good job of somehow changing the look of his hair. Like literally in that moment, his hair changes, his body language changes, his voice changes. It becomes higher and more shrill, like that deep sort of baritone that he had when he was being Ron is all gone because he just found out that she killed someone. Like it's brilliant. It's a moment of brilliant acting. It's a really great scene. So yeah, I can't say enough good things about Glen Powell's performance. Another strength of the film was definitely the romantic / sexual chemistry between Madison and Gary / Ron. I thought Adria and Glen had really great on-screen chemistry together. Like, wow, it was spicy, it was juicy, it was giving. Okay, one thing I didn't quite buy was the love, was the like romance, the feelings. I definitely bought the lust, like I definitely bought that they were in lust with one another, but in love was a little bit like because it didn't really feel like they knew each other. I mean, they literally did. They literally did it. She literally didn't know him. So yeah, I think that was a weakness of the script. Oh, and that reminds me, I was also slightly disappointed that this movie was more of a rom-com than an action movie. I thought it'd be more of an action comedy. Again, this is all expectations versus reality, which isn't strictly fair on the film. But I'll be honest, I thought this was more of an action comedy than a rom-com. And like, I've watched a couple of Glen Powell rom-coms in the past, so I know that he's good at them. But I thought we were getting something a bit different. And then next up you have Adria or Arjona. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing her name. But she was also great. You know, it was tough to kind of decipher her character at times. Like I said, there were moments where I thought that she was going to end up being, you know, evil or malicious or a criminal, because I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. But just taking her character at face value, I thought she was really likable and again, really charismatic on screen. And she definitely had great chemistry with Glen Powell, and their scenes together were really convincing. Again, I didn't quite buy that they were in love, especially because she literally did not know who Gary was, and they never really got to the bottom of that. They never really resolved that issue, the fact that he had been lying to her the entire time. And not to mention, there are actual like legal repercussions to that. I don't want to dampen the mood. I don't want but considering the fact that they were engaged in a relationship and he was doing it under false pretense, there are actually a little bit more problematic and illegal than the film depicts, but I digress. Anywho, I thought that Madison was a pretty cool character, even though I kept expecting her to be a little bit more than just like sexy eye candy. And the whole supporting cast was great as well. I particularly liked seeing RETTA. Huge fan of RETTA from Parks and Rec and from Good Girls. I think she's really great. She wasn't given a ton to work with here, but she's always great in comedic scenes, especially the scene that she had with her colleague when they were talking about Ron when the phone was still on. I thought that was hilarious. And in general, I thought there were some really strong comedic moments in this movie. And even though I wasn't expecting it to be a rom-com, I still wanted an action comedy, and then it definitely delivered on the comedy front. And so guys, with all of that being said, I'm going to be giving Hitman a 7.5 out of 10. So that's it from me, guys. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on Hitman, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this movie down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.